Hello there, and a very warm welcome to you. My name's Johnny Richardson. I'm part of the team here at Gecko, and it's my pleasure to be talking you through our forms solution. Now, this video is intended to be a system-wide overview, imagining that you're coming in blank to a brand new account with nothing in it, and it's been tasked to you to understand how exporting works, importing, contact fields, how you can send emails and texts, user groups, and all of that great stuff, in addition to, of course, building forms, sharing them, using our offline data capture app. Now, there's a lot of ground that we're going to cover in a very short space of time, but it may be that you're here thinking, well, Johnny, I only need to learn how to do some of that. All I want to do is build a form and share it, and my account is already set up. Well, the great news is we do have a very succinct getting started guide that's linked just below this article in the table there, so go ahead and click there. Or if you are interested in seeing how everything weaves together and works its magic in combination, feel free to stick around. Now, Gecko is popular for a number of really good reasons. Firstly, it is so easy to use. Everything's laid out very clearly, and as you'll see, is extraordinarily user-friendly. Another thing is that it's very powerful despite its apparent, on the surface, simplicity. Let's start with orientation, because it may well be that this is your very first time diving into Gecko, in which case, again, a very warm hello to you. You'll notice that all of our navigation is done here on the left-hand nav bar. Now, this is a setting that can be collapsed or expanded by clicking the button at the bottom, easy for me to say. You can see that we can view all of our contacts by going to the contacts, and these are all filterable. We can query them in whatever way we want. We have responses to any forms we build. We can view any and every text message or email we've ever sent, including the ability to view it immediately. So too with seeing any calls we've made or even listening to them back. Analytics through our dashboards, settings where we're going to be spending a lot of time today, our offline data capture app or visit app for event scanning, and obviously our forms which we're going to be using to build. So all of the navigation through the system is done here, and you'll see me clicking around it as we run through this video. Additionally, in the top right hand corner, you have access to probably my two favorite things. Clicking your name gives you this drop down. If you choose the option for Gecko Academy, which you may already be on because it could be that you're watching this video on here, you'll have access to our wonderful academy with a ton of different articles, probably hundreds of videos. I haven't counted them yet. Lots of them there. And of course, if you're struggling to find what you're looking for, just search in the search bar and hopefully you'll find what you're looking for. In addition to that, though, you have the ability to contact our brilliant customer success team who are always on hand to answer your questions. They're wonderful. They have so much experience with answering difficult questions. So if something's gone wrong and you need help, or even if you're just wanting to bounce ideas off of someone, this is a super option. Also on this drop-down, you can do things like viewing any changes to the product, the service status, submitting feedback. For example, I think this is brilliant, but it would be even better if it had this, and the ability to do things like changing your individual user settings or viewing the forms that you have permission to view, and if you're an administrator, being able to update those in a pinch. So let's jump into it then. We want to be building some forms. We're going to be seeing how forms work, how we can share them, how we can automate them, how we can change the settings, and how we can download this and use this entirely offline if we need to capture data at, say, a recruitment fair or a high school where we know there isn't going to be an active internet connection. So there's a lot of ground that we're going to be covering throughout this. And let's start by seeing how quick it is to build a form. We navigate firstly to the forms section, and this brings us to the forms table, which we can filter by things like the status of the form, whether it's published or archived or unpublished, any user groups or form groups, that we've set up, and we can see the status of a form, when it's been created, its name, the user who created it, and how many responses have been captured by this particular form. The Actions button lets you preview forms, view its individual dashboard, do importing and exporting, and doing things like viewing responses, cloning the forms, or removing it from the system if you no longer need it for the time being. You've also got a quick search bar to find things rapidly, but in our case, as we're wanting to build a brand new form, we're going to click the call to action. And in Gecko, the call to action is always in the same place, in the top right-hand corner, and let's go ahead and click New Form together. Now this will open our form builder, and here we have a number of different features. For example, we can choose to have forms over multiple pages, and there's no limit to this, though it is worth cautioning that the shorter your form is, the far more likely it is a student's going to see it through and actually submit a response. You can give your form an external name. This is what the form will be called to the user, although you can also set internal names in the settings. Here is my new Academy form. We can add a description text. This is some description text. And you can choose to add different types of fields to the form by either clicking to snap it to the grid or by dragging and dropping into place. Once added to the form, you can maneuver things by, again, dragging and dropping. You can clone fields that you want more of, and you can also choose to delete them by clicking the trash can icon. When you're ready to share your form and you've added your fields, just go ahead and hit Save Changes, and this creates your form. Clicking the link at the very top here opens your form, and this is the unique link to your form. Any changes we make to the form, new fields that we add, settings that we change, will still result in this link, so we can go ahead and safely share this via email or text with our students. There are a number of other ways to share forms too, but we're going to return to those. Now, at the very top of the form builder, we have these two options, and think of these as the different flavors of fields that we can add to our form. We can add contact fields, which is data which is going to populate the student contact record, and we have form fields, which is information that won't touch the contact record, but will instead just live on the form response itself. Now, you may be thinking, that makes no sense whatsoever, Johnny. Don't worry, we're going to illustrate this with an example very shortly. About as technical as we're going to get today is this. If a student fills in a form in Gecko, that's going to come in and it's going to create one contact and one response. If the same student uses the same details and fills in another form, you'll still only have one contact, but you'll now have two responses. And if they fill in another, you'll still have one contact, but three responses. Gecko works on a one-to-many relationship. Each contact can have as many responses as forms they can fill in. By default, Gecko uses the contact fields, full name and email address as matchable fields. Now, these can be changed on a system or account by account basis. Get in touch with us if you would like to change those. But for this reason, we'd really strongly recommend you always include the contact fields, full name and email address to make sure that Gecko has a good chance at either matching to an existing contact and merging into it so as to prevent duplicates, or seeing, we have no one with this unique full name and email combo, let's build a brand new contact instead. These contact fields can be managed entirely by you and the team, and this is a really good starting point for when you first get the keys to your account. They can be managed by going into Settings, and on the Settings menu you can scroll down to find it, or if you're lazy like me, you can search for contact fields using the search bar here. By default, Gecko gives you the full name, email, telephone preferred language, and organization fields, and all of these other fields that you see here are ones that I've created myself, and you can easily create them yourself by clicking New Contact Field in the top right-hand corner. Now, jumping back to our form for a second, let's imagine that on our form we wanted to capture the current high school that the student was attending, and we wanted that information to save to the contact record because it was really important. It was just as important to us as knowing their full name and their email address. We could do this by going to Settings, Contact Fields. Again, we clicked Create New Contact Field in the top right-hand corner, and we can now say Current High School. We can then tell Gecko what type of data this is. Is this a name? Clearly not, because we don't need a first and a last name. It's not an email address or a telephone field. Two potential candidates. We can either do a text single line field. You'll see there's a ton of different types of field that we can manage here. Or we could use a drop-down option that uses a pre-made options template list, sometimes known as a field options list, sometimes known as a pick list. Now, we're ultimately going to go for a text single line field because I just want a student to free type it. But if you are interested in setting up field options list or pick lists that you can use across your account, including in contact fields or on fields on forms, you can manage that by going to Settings, Field Options, and clicking Add New in the top right hand corner. Now, just a quick primer, we have a really good Academy article below that goes into this in a bit more detail, but you can choose to add your options lists in one of 3 different ways. We can import it en masse, we can copy and paste it into Gecko, or we can create it line by line, value by value. If you do go for the manual approach, you can choose a display value, which is the value the student would see on the form, and you can also include an export value, which is a GUID or X other value that you could choose to push to your CRM system different to your display value. So for example, if in our list of current high schools, we could maybe say Gecko Academy is one option. We could say Gecko High School is another option. And we could potentially say that this is the GUID or the value my CRM system is expecting on the pick list for this field, but this is the value for the high school. Now again, if we were to use this, these would be the different values the student would see on the form, but this is the value we'd be ultimately pushing to the CRM. If you wanted to copy and paste a list of maybe hundreds of options into Gecko, you could switch to text mode here. Come to the text box here and just copy and paste it in. And you'll notice if you're doing that, Gecko can support, again, display values and GUIDs that are pipe separated. The third and final option that we have is the ability to import options, as we were saying, either from a template, a text file, or directly from your CRM system. And again, we'll be talking about integrations later in this video. Let's return though to our contact field. It's going to be current high school. We've said it's a text single line, and we're going to click the Save button. If we return to our form now, we can see on the available list of contact fields, we have the current high school. And again, let's fill in the form now to see what this looks like when a student fills in this particular form. Before we do so, I just want to show you an existing contact on the system. I'm going to the contact page. We're clicking into a contact that was created a little while ago. And if we click on their record, we'll see we have a ton of other information already. We know who they are, their email address, telephone number, level of study, but we can see in their current high school, it's blank because we're yet to capture this information for them. Let's go in and fill our form in and capture this information for this student. So Johnny Richardson, Johnny at geckoengage.com, and we'll say our current high school is Gecko Academy. If we hit the submit button, and we come back to the contacts page, we can see there's no new contact called Johnny Richardson. Instead, Gecko's noticed, it was definitely this existing contact with these details, and we'll see there's now a value captured in that field. But so too, we can also jump to the responses tab to see the form submission. So here we see a great example of a one-to-many relationship. We have one contact, but for this particular contact, they have 3 different form responses. And again, this data doesn't go anywhere in Gecko. It's still here. At any time, we can go in and see what they said on this particular form, on this particular date and time. And we also get to capture useful information like the GIP address, which can be referenced later in things like workflows. Okay, tangent aside, but we've come a really long way in a very short space of time. In 10 minutes, you've learned a little bit about the navigation in Gecko, how to ask for help if you need it, how to build a new form and use the form tables, the difference between contact fields and form fields that we're going to get to very shortly, and how to build and save and share a new form. Now, if contact fields then are the means to add different fields onto the form, where if a student fills in this field or this field or this field, basically anything that saves into a contact field, save it to the contact record. Form fields then are fields which aren't associated to those top level contact fields. It's just data that lives on your form. And a great example of this is, you may be thinking, well, why don't we want to save everything to the top level of the contact? It's a good question, but there might be some instances where you just don't need to. For example, imagine you were asked to build a post-event survey form that you were sending to students who had attended any of your events. You may want to know who they are and their email address, but whether or not they liked the catering or they thought the parking facilities were good isn't really riveting information you'll want to query and do a ton with on the contact record. So maybe it's better to make this a form field that exists on the response, but nothing else. The form fields then have a ton of different utility. There are loads of different types you can use. We can use the name fields, emails, telephones, text fields where we're capturing a single line or multiple lines, drop downs with predefined options lists or options lists you create on the fly in the form. fields that capture dates, numbers, addresses, hidden fields that you can throw source codes or GUIDs into, event fields, organization, form sections, a lot of them here, text blocks as well for being able to share tons of text, file fields where students are able to upload documents and share them with you, repeatable fields for capturing things like qualifications, and matrix fields for asking a bunch of different questions and asking students to rank things on a sliding scale. So lots of different field types which we're able to use. A quick thing to point out, some of these form fields have a little question mark next to them, and put really simply, they'll either say web only for the vast majority of them, which means that these are fields that will only show up if you're sharing the form online with someone, or in the case of the media field, it's mobile only, which basically means it won't show up if somebody opens the form online, but if you're sharing the form on the offline data capture app, you can do some really cool things, like capturing a video using the camera on your device, or starting the microphone and capturing an interview with them that lasts 30 seconds, or taking a selfie, which is a really fun thing to do, and I recommend using it because it's a super engaging thing that gets kids really excited. I don't know if kids do get excited about selfies these days, but that's because I'm getting old. So once you've added your fields to the form, it's very easy to manipulate them. We've kind of already touched on this as I've clicked into some of these already, but in addition to dragging, moving, cloning, and deleting, you can edit any field once it's added to the form. For example, if we clicked into the email address field, we get 3 different tabs: settings, conditions, and integrations, and we'll go through them sequentially. In settings, we can change how the question is asked. So, what is your email address? I might want to ask instead of just saying email address. We can add some help text. Please enter your personal email address. The template tag is the name of the field, as we'll use in mail merge tags or for pre-filling. We can see that whatever is entered into this field is going to be saved to the contact field called email address. And we can also do things like specifying a minimum length or maximum length, asking the student to verify their email, that is, fill it in twice. We can also make this a required field, so students cannot submit the form submission without filling this in. And you do have the option as well of making fields hidden, which sounds a little bit covert and untoward, but it basically is a really good way, again, of crowbarring in source codes or doing some quite clever things with workflows that we'll learn about later on. If we share our form right now, because we made this required, we can see that we won't be able to submit the form without filling in this information. We have our help text there, and again, we set this as verified, so we're being told to fill in this field twice. Different fields have different types of options that we can use. For example, if we use a contact field that I'd already built on this called Program of Interest, and we save the form, we have an Options tab. Now, by default, this field is using a pre-made field options list. Remember, settings, field options list, and this is a pre-built list of all of my majors on the account. But if I wanted to just type out a couple, I could choose to add those. I could say, maybe we were doing STEM, so science, engineering, math, or technology. I think that's STEM. No, that's not STEM at all. I've spelled that terribly. There we are. We've got STEM in the right order now. We could choose to customize those particular options again, or we could just use a pre-made list. So it's easy to manipulate in these cases. In addition to being able to customize options lists, you have the ability to also use conditional logic on a form. And there are 2 main use cases for this that I wanted to talk to you about. Firstly, let's add maybe a few more fields. We'll add a year of interest, we'll add nationality, and level of study maybe to the form. So it's a wee bit longer. So if we open up this form now, it's fine, it's capturing information, but if a student lands on this, it's going to look quite a lot. There's lots of information we're asking for. There are many questions. A good way to hide this, or again boost completability, if that's a word, of the form is to use conditional logic to make the form gradually appear. So for example, we could say only show the what is your email address question if the full name field is not blank. So we could come into the email field and say conditions, add condition, and then this field will only show when any or all of the conditions are met. So in this case, only show if the full name field is not empty. And we can say only show the telephone field if the email address is not empty. And again, I won't bore you by doing absolutely all of these, but if we reload the form now, the form will be substantially smaller, because when I fill in this field, we get the next question. When I fill in this field, I get the next question. So it's a great way of slowly opening up the form rather than saying, here's 100 questions I need right away, and scaring the student away. There are also some other really nice practical applications for this. Here's a form in true Blue Peter, if you're in the UK fashion, that was built earlier. And this is a classic RFI form, and it starts with one question. This is a radio choice question, and we say, okay, you're here because you need information, but which of these are you? If I'm a teacher, I get very, very different questions to if I say I'm a parent or guardian. If I'm a current student, I get asked for my current Gecko University email address and my student ID. But if I say I'm prospective, I don't get those questions. And this is, again, all achieved using conditional logic. For example, we could say only show the program of interest field if the year of entry is spring 2024, for example. So we'd go into program of interest and we'd say only show this if the year of entry is equal to or contains, we've got a lot of different logical modifiers, we could say spring 2024. And if we quickly reload our form now, once that saves, there we are. We can see this field now appears, but if we choose another option, it hides. So there's a lot that you can do. That's not an example you probably ever want to do realistically, but conditional logic is easy to apply, and it can be applied to almost any field type at all on the Conditions tab. There's another really useful application which we're not going to go into in a ton of information because it's quite a dense topic, but it's a brilliant thing for usability and accessibility for students, and this is called parent and child logic. You may have used it on other form builders using a slightly different name, but I'm going to show you roughly what this looks like. And the premise of this is very, very simple. Here you can actually see a range of other different field types, including our address lookup. So if I was looking for something in Edinburgh, we do absolutely support the ability to find information and pre-fill things like address fields. But anyway, for parent and child logic, in this instance, we're going to begin by asking for a level of study. So great, which of these are you? Are you a graduate or an undergrad? If I select undergraduate, we're then going to use conditional logic to show the next field, which is area of interest. But crucially, we're only going to pull through levels of study relevant to the undergrad area. So let's say maybe archaeology. And now, again using parent and child logic, we're only going to show the options relevant to undergrad archaeology. I'm not going to show any other programs because they've given me these selections. If we change that to law, we only get the law options. If we change this to physics and astronomy, we get things that I'm not clever enough to understand. So very easy to set those up. You can learn more about those in the table right beneath this video, but it's great to know that the forms do support this because it can really be respectful of the students' decisions. So if they tell you something, not having to show them every single program, only show them the things relevant to them because it shows they're being listened to. My form is nearly ready to start sharing. I'm treating this as a really simple RFI form, and we have full name, email, telephone, current high school, year of entry, program of interest. I also want a space for the student to free type any questions they have. So I'm going to add a form field, text, multiple line. And we'll say this, ask us a question. And on a text field, we can do a ton of things. We can leave a minimum length, let's maybe make this 10 characters, and we'll set a maximum number of characters too. Perfect. Okay. Let's start looking at some of the other tabs as we run through this. We're actually going to skip over workflows for a second to go through the form settings very quickly. We can do a number of things here. We can publish or unpublish the form. We can give our form an internal name. So we could say this belongs to the admissions marketing team. And this is the RFI. So this means that internally, this is what the form will be known in Gecko, but externally, the form is still going to be called this. It also allows me to search for the internal name on the forms page. I can choose a group that this belongs to. I can tell Gecko these are the maximum number of responses the form should accept. We can predefine an expiry date, so on this date and at this time, unpublish the form automatically, or we can leave it blank to leave it open forever. On the display page, we can choose to do things like the success message, whether or not there should be a continue button after this form's been completed if it's done online, and also localization for any errors. So for example, if we plan on running this form in Chinese and translating all of our form fields over to Chinese, if we make a form field required, like email address, and the student misses it, what language should that error come back in? So should it be in Chinese? Should it be in English by default? Should it be any other languages that Gecko supports? Redirect rules is an absolutely fantastic feature that I promise you're going to love, or at least I hope you're going to love. The way that this basically works is it uses information based on the values that the student's given you. So for example, let's imagine that the student tells us, hey, I'm planning on applying in fall 2024 and my program of interest is going to be, let's pick a nice one, financial services, let's say, because that sounds fun. We can then redirect automatically the student to the financial services webpage based on that. We could instead say everyone needs to go to this URL, or we can create bespoke rules that says based on the program of interest, if the value is financial services, then this is the webpage I would like them to land on afterwards. If I remember how to put in URLs, we could say instead, if they say the program of interest is equal to any of the advanced electronics, so advanced, anything with advanced in the title, we want to take it to the advanced pages, then instead go to this website address. So a lot of customizability in what happens after the form submission. Forms can be fully customized as well. So on our form here, we can see we have a header image in the background and a logo, which is pulling through from my account. It's worth pointing out that these can be set by default in the system at any time by going to settings, account settings, and scrolling right to the bottom. You can see the default account color we're using, the logo in the top right hand corner, the background image that we're using, and these were all just completely uploaded by myself, or the Gecko logo that I chose to upload, but these can be overwritten on a form by form basis. So if you wanted a, I don't know, let's go bright red, orangey red, we could set this with the form. Oops, that's not the form. We could reopen that and we'll see that new color pulling in glorious effect and the ability to change those different settings. From an integration perspective, once your CRM is set up, you can tell Gecko whether or not you want to automatically sync every single time the submit button's clicked or not. You can also govern that manually or by setting up workflow rules to look for conditions and only sync if then. From an analytics perspective, you have the ability to paste in a Google Tag Manager ID, and again there's far more information on UTM tracking, Google Tag Manager in the article below, because that's a really important subject and great for understanding the return on investment that your forms are getting. One thing I actually missed out on the integrations tab, just because this is a test account and I have so many different integrations, is that you have the ability, if you do have Gecko Chat, to also embed a live chat widget on your form. So for example, if we wanted our bot to appear here and be able to answer any questions the student has, that's something you're certainly able to do. Now let's move over to the workflows tab, because for me this is one of the most important things that Gecko supports. The simple idea behind workflows is let's automate everything we possibly can, because you don't have enough time to manually deal with every individual form submission. Workflows can be created in as many ways as you want. There's a limitless number of conditions, limitless number of actions, and the general idea is tell Gecko what to look out for in the conditions, and then tell Gecko if these conditions are met, then at this time period, so immediately by default, or after a date, or after a delay of maybe an hour or a couple of minutes or days, then do these things. Now, conditions you do not need to set. If no conditions are set, as you can see here, the action is still going to run. So let's imagine that we wanted to create a workflow rule that meant as soon as the student fills in our form, we want to send them an email saying, thanks very much for submitting the form. It's great you're interested in whichever program they're interested in. We wouldn't even need to set a condition because this would run every single time. We could, however, set a condition based on the geolocation that they're in, so based on their IP address. We could set a condition based on any of the fields on the form. So if the year of entry contained any of the values for 2024 or 2025, we could choose to do this. But for anyone where it doesn't contain this, we could do something else. You can also predicate this based off of any labels, who's captured the information on the mobile app, who it's been assigned to, or even which event the app was used at. And again, we'll be getting into some of those app-related settings a wee bit later on. Crucially though, in the actions, we want to do two things. To send an email to the student, we may as well also send them a text message saying thanks very much for filling in the form. But to do this, we actually need to get everything set up, because remember, again, we're coming into this from a theoretical blank account. So we need to create a template to send, but we also need to tell Gecko which email address to send our template from. We also need to create our SMS template and also tell Gecko which telephone number to send it from. So let's get that set up now, and let's begin by going to settings. Now, all of your templates in Gecko are managed in the email and SMS templates section. So let's go ahead and click this option. And here, another really simple table. You can filter any results when you get them by the type or by any categories that you create yourself. You can also search manually for the name of any template here. Once built, any template can very easily be removed or added to a category, and you have the ability to send a test email to yourself or clone any pre-made templates very easily. Let's build our first template by clicking New Template in the top right hand corner. And you need to begin by telling Gecko what type of message you want to create. Is this an email? Is this a text message? We'll go with email first, but we will move over to SMS. And then tell Gecko what type of email we want to build. Now, we support 3 different types. Those of you with Gecko Promote, our marketing, our mass email and texting platform, do have the option for the drag and drop. The cool thing to note is that every single type does support import HTML. So you can, if you have a pre-built email template, you can copy that into any of these types. Although this is a bit more explicit, it doesn't render the email in any way, shape or form. So it's just more, if you just want to copy and paste something in and be done, that's the one to use. But we're going to view this template type here, the basic editor. We're then going to come down and give our email a simple name. So this is the Academy RFI form confirmation email. Set a subject line for the student, and thanks for filling in our form. Let's also throw an emoji in there, because why wouldn't you want to throw an emoji in there? We'll do a wave, and we'll also include the student's name. So we're going to get to this very shortly, but we'll throw in the student's full name in there. So thanks for filling in our form, whatever the name of the student is that's filling this in. And let's click next. Now the cool thing is, if you made a mistake, if you think, oh my goodness, this should have been an import HTML, you can go back to settings and you can change any of that information right away. But on the editor page is where we are now. So this is our email template. Just to show you how easy, if you did have a pre-built template and you wanted to import it, you need only click source code, come over to your HTML, copy it to your clipboard, replace everything in there, paste it, and hit OK, and you'll see that that will render in all of its resplendent glory in the body there. Or if you want to start, as I am, with a blank slate, no problem at all. Let's type out our email then. So we want to say, hi student, thanks for filling in our form. It's great to know you're interested in studying a program with us. Regards, Gecko University. Perfect. So we have the most ugly, the most generic email ever in the world. So let's beautify this a little bit and make it a bit more personalized and introduce some really useful topics like template tags as we go along here. So for example, we could choose to make things bold. We could choose to add colors, change the font sizes, add numbered lists, tables, images, link to things, hyperlink, use special characters, all of that good stuff. But I don't want to say hi student. I want to use the name of the student who's filling in my form. So what I can actually do is scroll down a little bit to this section where we're telling Gecko to use mail merge tags or template tags. And what we're going to tell Gecko to do is go to specifically the contact module. And when you're there, look at the name of the contact that you're emailing, and specifically bring back the first name. And if you hit plus, that's going to add this tag here. So again, in plain English, hey Gecko, whoever you're sending this to, whichever contact you're sending this to, find their full name and bring back their first name and put it in between these curly braces. Super, super easy. You'll notice that we can also reference any of the other contact fields here. So, and any other information like when were they last called, when was their last response. We could say even, thanks for filling in our form, and we could do last response in whatever time format. For example, thanks for filling in our form on this time. It's great to know that you're interested in studying a program with us. Instead of program, wouldn't it be nice if we actually said the name of the program? And again, we could reference information on the contact level and say whatever they said in their program of interest field. So instead of saying you're interested in studying a program with us, it's great that you're interested in studying this particular program with us. We could also say, remember, because we had that field on our form that said, here's what you're asking. You asked us, we could say, and this time, if you remember on the form, this is getting a little bit granular, but I think it's useful to point out the distinction. At the minute, we're telling Gecko, find the information that we're saving on the contact record. And that's fine, because at the minute, we're saving the full name to the contact name first field. We're saving the program of interest to the program of interest field, which is why we're saying contact program of interest, contact full name. But we're also have this field here called ask as a question, and we're not saving this to any contact field. So how can we tell Gecko to pull in whatever the student enters in the ask as a question field? Well, really simply, we can tell Gecko, okay, after you've done that, look, instead of at the contact, go to responses, and specifically look for the form called this. Admissions Marketing RFI form, the internal name that we set, and look for, and we'll see the different fields on the form. Ask as a question field, and add this here. So you asked us, and then whatever their response is in that particular field. Perfect. So to really quickly recap what we've done here, we've built a form. We're looking at building our workflow communication now, and we're building our very first email template. And rather than having a generic bland email, we're going to have an email that references the name of the student in both the subject line and the hi. We're then going to be telling the student when they filled in their response. We're going to parrot back to them the name of the course or program they said they were interested in, and we're going to be referencing a response field, some information that they've added in a response field that's not being saved to the contact record. Now, once you've built your first email template, you can choose to send yourself a test email. You can clone this and use it to speedily create new templates in the future. In fact, for more information on template tags while I'm at it, saying the word template, there's another really helpful link below with a list of almost every template tag you could ever use in Gecko. A quick note on the send test email. It will automatically send it to you, but you can comma separate and send it to other people. But do note that we won't, because we're not sending it to a contact and it's not linked to the response, these fields will just show up as blank. These will only work if you yourself fill in the form, in which case Gecko will be sending it to a contact and not just a random email address that's disassociated from everything. Okay, now we've built our initial email, let's go ahead and build our text message, and we'll do this much faster. We have our email. Let's go back to settings, email and SMS templates, new template, and let's add an SMS message. Now, of course, we can't set a subject line for a text message, but we'll call this the Academy RFI form SMS. And let's go ahead and paste in our message just here. So we'll do the same. So hi, contact name, thanks for filling in our form. In fact, we don't need to know that. We'll just say, hi, contact. It's great to know that you're interested in studying this with us. Speak soon. Now, a few things to point out here. Gecko does have a character counter, and you actually can go over this. It is not going to cut off at 160 characters. This just lets you know how many text messages are actually going to be sent. I think the upper limit is something like 1600, I think. So obviously don't try and push that limit. The shorter the text message, the better. But we do also support emojis and GIFs in the SMS templates. And so too, exactly the same as the email, you can use the contact mail merge tag builder right down here. Now, an interesting thing that this throws up, because the eagle-eyed of you will have noticed that we've got the description text here. It's best practice to allow your contacts to opt out of any messages. So any contact that replies with these keywords will be unsubscribed, and it's a good idea to mention this in the template. So we could say stop to opt out. Now, consents is a really complicated subject. How people use it massively varies depending on your location and your internal approach to how stringent or strict you want it to be with this. We have some really fantastic tools for managing all kinds of consents for email, text messages, others. I recommend checking out the full article below because, again, we could probably do an hour of talking about it just in this video. So we'll leave it out there, but do be sure to check below. Okay. So quick recap time. We have our email and our text template ready to send, but in order to be able to send them through a workflow, we also need an email address to send our email and a telephone number to send our telephone. So let's go ahead and set up our email first. This can be managed in settings by going to verified senders and domains. And here we've got two approaches. We could choose to create a brand new sender straight away by clicking sender in the top right hand corner. And we'll call this the RFI team. In fact, we'll say the admissions team. And we could say, here's the email address. So this is the name of the sender as it will appear in the student's inbox. And this is the email address we're sending from. As soon as I hit save, this email inbox will receive an email from Amazon Web Services with a link saying Gecko's requested basically to use this in emailing. Are you okay with us pretending that we're your email address? Click the link, redirect it back to Gecko. Once you log in with these details, you'll then instantly have the email address as verified, which means you can start sending emails. Congratulations. Now, the downside to this, though, is that as those of you who have used senders and domains and spoofing before, it's not particularly robust in that if you're trying, for example, if I was at Gecko University and I was trying to email real students with an @geckoengage.com email address, then it would flag as, I know I'm on the Gecko Engage domain and I'm receiving an email pretending to be from that domain. This looks suspicious. Let's put it in the junk or the spam folder, which doesn't benefit anyone. So to that end, what you can actually do is you can choose to verify your domain. Again, you can learn more about that in the article below. But the idea of verifying a domain means that you verify the domain. You can afford things like DKIM verification, mail from verification, SPF verification. That means that deliverability of your emails goes through the roof and it massively increases. So the chances of you being flagged as spam are massively reduced. That was a tongue twister, particularly 40 minutes or so into a training video. The other added benefit is that once you've verified your domain, it means that any email address ending in this suffix would instantly be verified. It doesn't need to send a link through. You don't need to click anything, and you can make up emails. So for example, I could have admissions team, and we could say admissions@geckoengage.com. This is the sender name, and this is not a real inbox. It does not exist anywhere at all in the world, but I can instantly start sending from this in Gecko by virtue of the fact that I have a domain set up to instantly verify anything that ends with Gecko Engage. So super easy to manage. So we have our email template, we have our sender to start emailing from. Now we want to also be able to send our text messages through our form workflow. Let's go ahead and set up a telephone number to send that. And this is really quick again. This is in settings and VoIP numbers. And these are really the only kinds of things that we need to do once or twice. You need to set up these to begin with, but once these are set up, everyone can use them in every conceivable way throughout Gecko. So we can see a list of all of our available numbers currently. We can add to it by clicking New Number in the top right-hand corner. We can tell Gecko we want to purchase or procure a brand new number. We'll give this a name. We'll call this the Academy RFI number. Tell Gecko which region this number belongs to. Add an area code to refine your options if you'd like, and choose the type of number that you'd like this to be. Crucially, we want to send text messages on it, so make sure it has the voice and SMS capability. And if we hit search, We're querying Twilio. In fact, there don't seem to be any numbers available for that particular region, so let's maybe choose a different one. Perfect. We can see a range of different numbers available to us, and as long as they have a tick in that SMS outgoing option, we can click there, hit OK, and this is now going to be a text message, a number that we can start using to send outgoing text messages. Okay, let's return to our form. Let's bundle up these different workflows now that we're ready to get going, and then we'll start talking about the important things, sharing our form, seeing what it looks like when responses come in. How can we manipulate those? How can we do things like UTM tracking and using the offline data capture app? So let's go to workflows. And let's build that initial workflow. Remember, we wanted to say, thanks very much for filling in the form. Here's an email and here's a text. We'll leave the conditions blank for the time being, but we want to say immediately when the form submission comes in, send an email. And we want to send this to the email address in the what is your email address field. And we could hold down the control key actually and select other Gecko users, or we could choose to send this to anyone who's captured the lead on the app. Or we could choose to send this to any external teams who we think might be interested in knowing about this. And we'll get into some use cases shortly for why that might be a good thing. We tell Gecko which template we want to send to the email addresses we've selected. And in this case, it's the RFI form completion email. And we can preview that if we've forgotten what it looks like. We can then say, here's the email address to send this from. And remember, we created the admissions team email. And in my case, I'm going to choose to ignore consent preferences, but you may want to honor it and only send it to people who have given you consent. Okay. We're also wanting to send a text message. So send a text message. Again, here's the template we want to use. We can make changes if we need to right there. Here's the telephone number to send it from. So the Academy RFI number, and we can choose to send this to any telephone number on the contact record. At the minute, the only telephone field that we have on this account is telephone, but you may be capturing home number, cell number, parent number, and you can choose which of those to target. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this, and we're now set up to instantly send those workflows. I am going to set one final email workflow because I think this is my favorite workflow in all of forms. I'll never stop talking about it because I think it's brilliant. I, as an admin, want to receive a receipt of every person who fills in this particular form. And so I'm going to choose the user. I'm going to leave this as the default email template. This is built on every single account, so you can start using this immediately. I'm going to have this come from Gecko University for a bit of difference, and I'll make sure that this is sent. So 3 things are going to happen when the form submission comes in. We're immediately, not at a time delay, immediately going to send an email to the student using this template and send it a text message to the student. But internally, I'm sending it to the member of the team, Johnny Richardson, using the default email template. Now, before we start seeing what this looks like in the emails, which we will shortly, let's touch quickly on the permissions tab. At the minute, I'm the only person able to see this form until I grant other users the ability to see it, either on an individual basis or just by giving different user groups access to this. So as a really quick kind of aside, if somebody isn't able to see the form on the app, or they're not able to see it in Gecko itself, it may just be as simple as them not having permission. So make sure you head into the form and click add permission. If you're an admin, you can actually give yourself permission by going to user settings, forms, and giving yourself permission right there. Okay, we are ready for the Share tab, which is probably the best thing other than workflows in the app and everything else, one of the best things about forms. And this is just a really simple way of being able to share forms in multiple ways very, very quickly. Firstly, we have the web form link. This is a link that we've actually been using to view our form in the past, but here it can be copied to the clipboard. It can be shortened very easily. You can also turn this into a QR code very readily. So if you wanted to laminate this, put this in your office, put this at your front desk so students can capture, can open the form on their devices, it's very, very simple to do. And these come in slightly different flavors, Snapchat, Gecko, or WeChat branded QR codes. If we scroll to the very bottom of the page, you've also got the ability to embed your form on a web page. And this can be done either as a JavaScript embed or as an iframe. And it's very simple. Just copy this script to your clipboard, send this over to your IT team and tell them this is the web page that we want this to be live on. Thank you. And when that is published, you'll see the form is instantly going to be available. And the lovely thing about both of these approaches, the embed and the web form link, is that any changes we make to the form in the future, so for example, if we add a lovely text block to, a lovely text block just to explain some information, as soon as you make those changes on the form, that will instantly pull through to any places where the web you're sharing your form effectively. Okay, nice and simple. There's a bunch of other things that we could do too, such as pre-filling the form, but again, we go into a little bit more detail in one of the Academy articles below. So if you are keen on pre-filling things with either static or dynamic values, that is definitely a possibility. Okay, let's start looking at the form and actually filling this in. We're going to fill this in online and see what it looks like when it comes in. We'll see those workflows come in. We'll then start sharing this on the actual capture app. So we're imagining that we're capturing this information entirely offline. So let's begin by opening up our form, and we can see the lovely orange. We've got our live chat widget here and we're good to go. So let's fill in this form. So we'll say new student 1, Johnny at geckoengage.com. I'll enter my telephone number so I do receive the text message. The current high school is Gecko High School, of course. We'll say year of entry is fall 2024. Program of interest is going to be, let's go network engineering. And this is our question. Perfect. Okay, so your request has been received and will be dealt with as soon as possible. Now, if I come over to my email address in another tab, here we are. Then we'll notice that I've actually received 2 emails. The first is the message to the student. So thanks for filling in our form, and then the name of the student that we entered. And if we click on this, thanks for filling in our form, and then we've got the time and the date that the student filled this form in, pulling in just the first name. It's a stupid first name. I should have used a real one. And it's got that selection. So we know that you selected network engineering. And we're also pulling through what the student said in that question. Regards, Gecko University. Our other message is the internal one. Remember that we said send to the user Johnny Richardson, and this gives a breakdown of every single thing that the student said on the form in one condensed place, and also the ability to view the response. So this is just a wonderful workflow that can be included, this default email template that allows you to give visibility and triaging to other teams. And this can be done in a number of awesome ways. Just quickly to return to the workflows for a second, we could say, for example, if the program of interest contains anything to do with law, so international law, then what we want to do is immediately send an email to the law team, so law@geckoengage.com, using the default email template. We could also say if the program of interest contains, engineering. So any of the engineering options, of which, my goodness, I chose a bad one because there are tons of them, but any of the engineering programs, then we immediately want to send it to the engineering school because this is going to be of interest to them. So a lot of malleability, a lot of flexibility with this. If we head at any time to the responses tab, we can see any new responses that have come in, and we can see some of the ones that we've completed over the course of this video. Now, the responses can be filtered by the exact form that's been filled in, by the date, any labels, who's captured them using an app, and a range of other things such as has this synced over to a particular CRM. If we click on one of these responses, again, it'll give us that information on that the student submitted, and also allow us to make any changes to the form submission, which is really useful. Now, one thing that I did want to talk to you about briefly is tracking and UTM parameters. We've kind of touched on it in a number of different ways. Of course, you do have the ability in the form settings analytics section to talk about Google Tag Manager, but you could also, for example, add hidden fields to your form. We could add maybe 2 hidden fields, and we'll say UTM source. We'll call another one the UTM term. we could choose to populate this information using the pre-populate forms, and we could say anyone who fills in this, we know that we're going to be sharing this particular form on Facebook, and the term is going to be Q3, and we could update the link, and we can see that those hidden fields are now being targeted with those particular values. Again, this is a whirlwind approach to these particular UTM sources, but I just wanted it to be known that this information can absolutely be added to any forms and included in the response data when the form submission ultimately comes back into Gecko. Now we've looked at the form, now that we have our form ready to build, let's talk about how we can take this offline and start sharing with students, because as we've seen here from the Share tab, we can share this with students online. We could email out the link to the form, we could send a text with it, we could share it via QR code, or we could share it by embedding it on a website. But how do we capture this if we are at an online, fair, if we're at a fair and the Wi-Fi reception is really patchy? Well, there's a few things that I want to do first. The first thing is I'm going to make sure my agent, Johnny Richardson, is logged in has permission to view the form. And the second thing I want to add is our media only field, which, if you remember, is the field which is going to appear only on the app. So we'll say take a selfie with Gecko University, and we'll change this to an image, and we'll make this required because it's important that they capture this information. I'm now going to go to the download apps section, of which we have the Capture app here, and it's worth saying that the Capture app is designed to be lightweight. It's designed to work on a ton of different device types. Particularly, we have options for the Apple iOS, Android versions on both the Amazon store and on the Google Play Store too. Now, I'm going to be using an Android device that I've downloaded from the App Store and from the Google Play Store, and I have my device ready for us right over here. Now, again, there's a comprehensive breakdown of how to use the app in an article below, which goes into a bit more granular detail, especially on the setup, but this is it in a condensed version. Once you've logged into the app, we want to go to the admin page first, and we're just going to pull down on the forms to refresh. And basically, this is the only time we'll need an active internet connection other than when we're syncing information back. And this is pulling all of the latest versions of all of the forms on Gecko. And we can see our admissions marketing RFI forms here, as well as some others that I'm choosing not to display on the main page. Now, I can actually tap into the form here if I wanted to set any default values. So this isn't actually the form itself, but let's imagine that I'm currently at a high school, and the high school that we're sharing this form with and that I'm visiting at the minute is the Gecko High School. Well, I don't need to ask every single student to fill in this because I already know where I am. I know also that I'm speaking with all of the students who are going to be eligible for a spring 2025 start. I can select that ahead of time so that this information is pre-filled. I've also got these source fields, so I can actually manually change these to this is a recruitment fair, and this is Q1 that I'm capturing this information. Now, these are values which will automatically be on the form, but students can overwrite if needs be. On the settings page, I can do things like tell Gecko which event I'm currently attending. And this will automatically add any students I capture to this particular event which has been created, meaning that we have an attendance record in there in Gecko which can be queried and used to manipulate the data and find exactly where we met different people. We can also do things like choose the default country we're at. So if we're doing an international recruitment fair and we're, for example, in India, then we may say the country we're currently at is India. So all of the address fields has that country pre-selected. All of the telephone fields on my form has the Indian dial code and automatically affixed to it. Once we've set up our form, whether or not you are wanting to get this granular and filling out information or not, we just return to the main area, tap into our form in question, and we can see that branding is pulled across. Those default values are there, but if I do need to change it, maybe I'm a special exception and I'm actually going to be starting slightly earlier, each student can change that information. And of course, we don't see those hidden UTM fields because they are hidden fields for a reason. Now, one of the lovely bits of functionality from the form, and the general idea would be you would now share your device with students and say, hey guys, can you fill this in? But if there does come to a situation where there's a queue, maybe at the booth, the fair you're doing, or there are just lots of students gathered around because they want to see what all the fuss is about, you can actually turn your device into a QR code. So you can say, hey guys, the internet's actually not bad here. You all have phones. Just scan this, please. And in doing so, this is going to load the web version of the form for them. So if we give this to a student, we'll get them to fill this in. I'll say, Johnny, student. I'm not very creative with names, sadly. We'll go Johnny at geckoengage.com. I won't add a telephone number because it's not required. Year of entry is already chosen. Program of interest, I could search. Maybe is there anything? Law. Yeah, let's go for that particular law. We could then ask a question. What are the requirements? And we could also choose to take a selfie with Gecko University. And this is one of the lovely things that it'll open up the device camera for you, and you can choose to toggle between the front-facing or the rear-facing camera. Perfect. I think that's okay. We'll go for that. So we've captured that information. Let's now hit OK. And as soon as we hit OK, the form is reset. All of the default fields are filled back in, ready for the next student. Now, the app can be configured in one of two ways. You can have it automatically sync over to Gecko every single time that a form submission comes in the advanced settings, or like me, you could be a bit more relaxed and you could say, hey, I only want to sync responses when I capture them. When it comes to uploading these back to Gecko, all we need to do is go to the settings section in the admin area and choose upload responses. And providing you have an internet connection, what this is going to do is push all of that lovely data back to the Gecko platform. So we can see that file uploading. And if we come back to the responses section, we can see that there's now a green mark next to my student, meaning that this data should be back on Gecko. And if we come into the responses tab and refresh this, we can see a couple of things. We can see the name of the contact we've just captured, the form that we've used to capture it, and we can also see which agent was logged into the app at the time when this particular lead was captured, who it was captured by. And if we click into the details, we can see the name of the form, again, the event we captured this at, the device that was used, which agent captured it, and in addition to that, all of that information we captured offline. In addition to those hidden fields, in addition to wonderful, terrible selfie there. Goodness me, that should be deleted and possibly burnt. Okay, so that is how easy it is to get up and running with the forms. And again, I just want to quickly recap. We've gone over so much ground. We've talked about and learned all about the difference between contacts and responses. We've set up emails and texts. We've talked about contact fields, field options lists, different formed fields, parent and child logic, conditional logic, workflows, sharing our form. We've even touched on the offline data capture app too. The final things that I want to talk about now are importing into Gecko, exporting, reporting, and also user groups and integrations. Let's firstly talk about the reporting capabilities on Gecko because they're pretty wide-ranging. On the form itself, at any time you can click the Actions tab where you can do a lot of the things we're about to talk about actually, in addition to cloning or archiving forms you're done with. But you have this option for the form dashboard. And one of the things I love about this is it's a really simple visualization on which you can apply any pre-made filters over any date range, and it gives you a visualization of how many impressions has the form got, how many responses, what UTM parameters have we captured if they've been configured, and also a breakdown visually of the selections that students are giving you to particular questions on the form. Now, really importantly for Gecko, because we know how varied people's reporting capabilities are and requirements, you have the ability at any time to export your responses from the system. Now, again, these are really bespoke. They can be customized in any way, filtered by whatever date ranges you need or which events you've captured at. And I recommend checking out the full article below to teach you precisely how to find the export type that you'd like. We also support recurring exports that can be pushed even to SFTP servers. Importing responses is another thing that we allow as well. So if you have a Gecko form and you'd like that to be your single source of truth, but you have 100, 200, 1,000 responses that you've captured elsewhere on a spreadsheet, you can import those directly into Gecko. Just simply upload that responses in settings, imports, tell Gecko it's a one-off responses import. Here's the CSV file, here's the form that we're wanting to import them to, and then you just simply match the fields. So full name to full name, email to email, and all of the different field types to the requisite data on your sheet. The final things to talk about then, particularly if you're a new user to Gecko, if this is your first time using the platform, is the ability to create new users and permissions. Now, this is often something that we're asked about, how can we define those different user groups, those different permissions? And it can be done pretty easily by going to settings and user groups. Now, Gecko has a number of pre-built user groups with different permissions, including administrators, but we give you full control over creating your own user groups, where you get to define what people are able to do. Are they allowed to view things, create things, update, delete, or in the case of calls, listen into calls? And this extends to a range of different functionalities: contacts, events, filters, forms, labels, responses, users, user groups, being able to send messages or not, being able to import into the system, or being able to export. There's lots here. You can create these however you like. A useful user group to call out is if you have a group of people who you only ever want them to maybe not be able to even log into Gecko, but you do want them to use the Capture app, because the idea is you're building a form, they're attending the fairs, you want them to download your form onto an app and capture data and sync it back to Gecko. There's a brilliant user group which is called the mobile only, and this will give them every permission they need to not be able to log into the system and play with your settings, but to do just what we explained. When it comes to adding new users to your account, you just simply need to go to settings and users. You can filter your different users by statuses or the user groups we were just talking about. And creating a new user is a case of clicking the new user button in the top right hand corner, adding the name of the user, the email address of the user, and the user group you want them to be part of. Now, we haven't really had time to run through it in this particular video, but it is worth pointing out that a lot of this information, such as mobile, telephone, and position, can be dynamically pulled into any emails you're sending. I want to just illustrate this with a very quick example of what can be achieved here very simply using what we've already seen. If you remember, when we captured, oh goodness, let's get rid of that because that's horrifying. If we remember when we used our Capture app earlier, we were logged into the app, and we can see in Gecko, we can see precisely which member of your team was logged in at the time when this was captured. How nice would it be for the student, in this case Johnny student, who met Johnny Richardson from Gecko University at this event, how nice would it be for the student if they received a personalized email from this member of the team dynamically from Gecko? Well, Gecko can do that. On our form, for example, we could set up a workflow. Let's delete the one that's there, and we could say immediately, in fact, maybe not immediately, maybe because we wouldn't want this to send to the student whilst they were stood next to them, but we could say after a delay of 3 hours after capturing the response, send an email to the student using a template that dynamically references the name of the agent who was logged in. And as an email signature, here's their telephone number, here's their position. So to the student, it's going to look like it's really personalized, high touch. Wow, I met this person 3 hours ago and they're sending me a personalized email. But in reality, that's fully automated. It's very, very simple to do. From the user creation perspective, once you have added name, email, and user group, hit save changes and you're done. That user is then sent an email. They need only log in using the link in their email that they receive, put in their password, and then they're a fully fledged Gecko user. The final thing to walk through in your Gecko run through today is integrations, and these are all managed in the settings and integrations tab here. And Gecko supports a wide range of different integrations, and again, these vary so significantly from platform to platform, CRM to CRM, that it would be madness to try and condense all of them into just one video. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to link you again to the article below to learn a wee bit more. But the positive there is once you find your CRM system of choice, we'll walk you through in video fashion how to create that link and precisely what it looks like to map fields across and to see what responses look like both in Gecko and in your CRM system when everything's combined. Thank you ever so much for watching this video. Hopefully it gives you enough ammunition to start getting your account set up, or enough to start understanding how Gecko does things like sending emails, importing contacts, managing contact fields, users, forms, data capture app, and the like. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to the team, and we can't wait to see what you do with your forms.